The MC's voice boomed across the sunlit ballroom of the Santa Barbara estate. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Reed Thompson for a very special performance requested by the groom himself. My heart stopped cold. I hadn't signed up for this nightmare, yet here I was, steps away from the stage where Stephen stood in his crisp black tuxedo next to his bride Emily. The man who had once been my everything now promising forever to someone else while the entire wedding party clapped politely. I gripped the edge of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. My cousin Mia, who happened to be Emily's maid of honor and the only person who knew our full history, had cornered me 2 weeks ago with that pleading look. "It'll be healing for everyone," she'd said. "Stephen specifically asked if you'd sing one song. Just one. Healing." The word tasted like ash. I had driven 6 hours from Chicago telling myself it was closure, that 5 years was long enough to bury what we were. Now the spotlight hit me like a freight train and every eye in the room waited. I stood, legs unsteady, and walked to the microphone stand under the white rose arch. The band gave me a nod. My fingers brushed the strings of the acoustic guitar they'd set up. I cleared my throat, looked straight at Stephen, and began the song I had written for him in our sophomore year dorm room back in Chicago. The melody started soft, almost tender. We danced in the rain on Michigan Avenue, kept our secrets safe where the city lights couldn't see my voice carried clear across the silent hall. I changed one line on the spot, the words slipping out before I could stop them. But the mornings after always stole the truth from me. The room didn't just quiet. It froze. Forks paused mid-air. Champagne glasses hovered. Stephen's face drained of color, his hand tightening around Emily's. I kept singing, each verse peeling back another layer of the past we had buried. By the final chorus, the entire ballroom was holding its breath. 300 guests suddenly aware that the song wasn't just pretty words. It was a confession wrapped in melody. When the last note faded, no one clapped. No one moved. The silence pressed down like a weight. I lowered the guitar. Stephen's eyes locked on mine across the sea of stunned faces, and in that single look I saw every memory crash back. The late-night study sessions that turned into stolen kisses. The promises whispered under thin dorm blankets. The night he told me his Texas family would never accept us and he couldn't lose them. The morning he left without saying goodbye. All of it hung in the air now, exposed under the California sun. I stepped off the stage, legs shaking, and headed for the side exit before anyone could speak. But Stephen was already moving, cutting through the crowd with a determination I hadn't seen since college. "Reed, wait." His voice cracked. Guests parted like water. Emily watched from the head table, confusion written across her perfect makeup. I didn't stop. The gravel path outside crunched under my shoes as I walked toward the cliffs overlooking the ocean, heart hammering louder than the waves below. Stephen caught up, grabbing my arm gently but firmly. "You changed the lyrics." I spun around. "You asked me to sing. You knew what song it was." The wind tugged at his tie, loosening it just enough to remind me of all the times I had fixed it for him before secret dates. "Or did you forget what those words meant?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, the same nervous gesture from years ago. "I didn't think I thought after all this time it would be different. Safer." His voice dropped. "I never stopped hearing that song in my head, Reed. Every single day." The confession hit harder than the silence inside. I wanted to scream, to demand why he had dragged me here if safety was still his priority. Instead, I just stared at the man I had loved with every piece of my 20-year-old heart, now 30 and still hiding. The ocean roared behind us, indifferent to the storm we had just unleashed in front of 300 witnesses. I didn't know if I wanted to hug him or walk away forever. But one thing was crystal clear. Nothing would ever be the same after that song. We stood on the cliff path for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Stephen's eyes darted back toward the reception hall where muffled voices had finally started up again, probably filled with whispers about the guy who just sang his heart out at the groom's wedding. "Emily doesn't know," he said quietly, as if that explained everything. About us. About any of it. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course she doesn't. That was always the plan, right? Keep Reed in the shadows so Stephen Hayes could have the perfect life his parents pictured. The words tasted bitter, but they needed to be said. 5 years of swallowing them had left scars I was only now feeling again. He flinched. It wasn't that simple. You know what my dad is like. The church, the business, the expectations. Coming out would have destroyed everything. I thought if I ended it clean you could move on. Find someone who wasn't scared. Clean. I stepped closer. The scent of his cologne, the same citruswood blend that used to cling to my hoodies. You left a note on my pillow saying, "This is for the best," and transferred to another campus the next week. That's not clean, Stephen. That's running. The wind whipped my hair across my face, but I didn't brush it away. I wanted him to see every emotion I had buried. Inside the hall someone started the music again. A generic pop song meant to restart the party. But the magic was gone. I could feel the shift even from out here. Guests were probably piecing together the lyrics, the looks, the way Stephen had stared at me while I sang. You asked me here knowing I'd bring the past with me, I said. Why? Because I'm tired of pretending. His voice broke on the last word. Seeing you walk in today, it hit me that I've been living half a life. Emily is wonderful. She really is, but she's not you. No one ever was. The admission should have felt like victory. Instead it felt like another wound. I turned toward the ocean, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. And what now? You tell her the truth in front of all these people? Ruin the day you planned for 2 years. I shook my head. I didn't come here to blow up your wedding, Stephen. I came because Mia begged me and because some stupid part of me still cared enough to say goodbye properly. He reached for my hand but stopped halfway, fingers curling into a fist. Stay for the rest of the night. Please. We can talk after the reception. Just don't leave like this. I wanted to say no. I wanted to get in my rental car and drive back to Chicago where my small apartment and my music students waited. But the look in his eyes was the same one from our last night together, raw and desperate. 1 hour, I said finally. Then I'm gone. We walked back inside side by side but not touching. The guests tried to act normal, but the stares followed us like spotlights. Emily gave me a tight smile when we approached the head table. That was beautiful, Reed. Thank you. Her voice was polite, but her eyes searched mine for answers I couldn't give. Stephen sat down beside her, and I took the empty seat reserved for Mia's +1. Feeling like an intruder in my own story. The rest of the evening blurred. Speeches, cake cutting, the first dance. Every time Stephen glanced my way the room seemed to hold its breath again. By the time the band announced the last song I had replayed every moment of our college years in my head. The way he laughed at my terrible cooking in the dorm kitchen. The quiet nights studying for finals with our legs tangled under the desk. The fight we had when I wanted to march in the Pride Parade and he begged me not to because someone from his hometown might see the photos. When the lights dimmed for the final slow dance, I slipped outside again, needing air. Stephen found me on the same cliff path, jacket off and sleeves rolled up. She knows something is wrong, he said without preamble. I told her I needed 5 minutes. He looked exhausted, the weight of the day pressing on his shoulders. I don't know how to fix this, Reed. But I know I can't keep pretending anymore. I studied his face in the moonlight. The same sharp jaw, the same kind eyes that had once made me believe love could conquer anything. Fixing it doesn't mean destroying her day, I said softly. Some truths need time. The words surprised even me. Part of me still wanted to scream, but another part recognized the boy I fell in love with was still trapped inside the man standing before me. He nodded slowly. Will you at least let me call you tomorrow? After everything settles. I hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. 1 call. That's all I'm promising. As I drove away from the estate later that night, the Pacific Coast Highway stretching dark and empty ahead of me. I realized the silence in that ballroom had been only the beginning. The real performance, the one that would change both our lives, was just starting. The call came at 7 the next morning while I was nursing coffee in a roadside diner somewhere north of Santa Barbara. Steven's name lit up my phone and my stomach twisted. I almost didn't answer, but the memory of his exhausted eyes on the cliff path made me swipe accept. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Hey." His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept. "Can we meet?" "Not at the house. Somewhere private." He named a small park in Montecito I remembered from a weekend trip we'd taken during spring break years ago. The same park where we had shared our first real kiss under a sprawling oak tree while pretending to study for midterms. I agreed before I could talk myself out of it. 2 hours later, I pulled into the shaded parking lot. Steven was already there, leaning against his rental SUV in jeans and a plain gray hoodie, looking nothing like the polished groom from yesterday. We walked the trail in silence until we reached the oak. The same one. He sat on the bench and I stayed standing, arms crossed. "I told Emily everything last night," he said without preamble. "Not the details, but enough. That there was someone before her. That it was serious. That I never really got over it." He rubbed his face. "She cried. A lot. But she didn't throw me out. She said she needs time and that we should postpone the honeymoon." I agreed. The news should have felt like justice. Instead it felt heavy. "Why now?" I asked. "Why drag me across the country to sing that song if you weren't ready to face it?" "Because hearing you sing it made me realize I've been running for 5 years and I'm exhausted." He looked up at me, eyes raw. College me was terrified. My dad's voice was in my head every second, telling me real men don't love other men. But yesterday, watching you stand there and own every word, I saw what courage looks like. I want that. I sat down finally, the bench creaking under our combined weight. Memories flooded back uninvited. The night we snuck into the university theater after hours and danced to no music under the stage lights. The weekend we drove to Michigan and stayed in a cheap motel because neither of us could afford anything better. The fight in the rain outside his dorm when he told me his parents were coming to visit and I had to disappear for 3 days. "You hurt me," I said quietly. "Not just the leaving. The way you made me feel like I was something to be ashamed of." "I know." His hand rested on the bench between us, palm up in silent offering. "I was ashamed of myself, not you. Never you. I thought if I could just fit the mold they wanted, the fear would go away. It never did." We sat like that for a long time, the oak leaves rustling above us. Eventually he told me about the years after college, the job in his father's company, the pressure to date the right girls, the nights he drove around Chicago hoping to catch a glimpse of me at open mic nights. I told him about moving to New York for a year, trying to lose myself in music, then returning to Chicago to teach because the city still felt like home even after he left it. By the time the sun dipped lower, we had run out of words but not out of feelings. "I'm not asking for anything," he said as we walked back to the cars. "I just needed you to know the truth. And that I'm sorry. Truly." I stopped beside my car. I needed to hear that. But sorry doesn't erase the years I spent wondering if I was enough. I opened the door. "Take care of Emily. She deserves honesty too." He nodded, but the look in his eyes said this conversation wasn't over. As I drove away, I realized the silence in the ballroom had cracked something open inside both of us. Whether it would heal or shatter further remained to be seen. Back in Chicago the following week, life tried to return to normal. My students at the Community Music Center asked about the wedding, unaware of the drama. I smiled and said it was beautiful. Inside I replayed every word Steven and I had exchanged under that oak tree. The guilt, the longing, the fear. All of it mixed together until I couldn't tell where one emotion ended and another began. Then the text came. "Dad found out. He wants to talk. I could use a friend who understands." I stared at the screen for 10 minutes before replying with a single word. When? Stephen's father arrived in Chicago 3 days later like a storm front. I knew because Stephen called me at midnight, voice tight with panic. He flew in unannounced. He heard rumors from the wedding guests. Someone recorded part of your song on their phone, and it's circulating in our family group chat. I could hear the exhaustion in every syllable. He wants to meet you. Tomorrow. Says it's time we all had a conversation like men. I almost hung up. The last thing I needed was to face the man who had terrified Stephen into hiding for years. But the fear in Stephen's voice pulled at the same protective instinct that had made me keep our secrets back in college. Where? I asked. Neutral ground. The coffee shop on Michigan Avenue near the Art Institute. 10 a.m. I arrived early, nursing black coffee and watching the door. Stephen walked in first, pale and drawn in a button-down that looked slept in. His father followed, tall and broad-shouldered with the same sharp jaw but harder eyes. Mr. Hayes spotted me immediately and strode over like he owned the place. Reed Thompson, he said, voice low and measured. Stephen tells me you two had a relationship in college. No hello. No pleasantries. Just straight to the accusation. I set my cup down. We did. And it was real. Stephen sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed. A silent show of solidarity I hadn't expected. Mr. Hayes leaned forward. My son has a fiancée. A life. A future. Whatever happened back then is over. I won't have some singer dragging our family name through the mud because he couldn't move on. The words stung, but I kept my voice steady. I didn't ask to be invited to that wedding. I didn't ask Stephen to request that specific song. And I certainly didn't ask for your approval. I glanced at Stephen. But I won't lie about who I am or who we were. Not anymore. Stephen spoke then, voice stronger than I had heard in years. Dad, I love Emily. I do. But I've been lying to myself and everyone else since I was 19. Reed wasn't a phase. He was the first person who ever saw me completely. And yesterday I finally saw myself too. The conversation stretched for over an hour. Accusations flew. Tears were blinked back. At one point Mr. Hayes stood up, chair scraping loudly, and I thought he would walk out. Instead he looked at his son with something almost like pain. I raised you to be strong. To lead. This isn't the path I pictured. It's my path, Stephen said quietly. And I'm asking you to let me walk it. When they left I stayed at the table, hands shaking. Stephen texted me later. Thank you for being there. He didn't disown me. That's something. The small victory felt hollow against the years of damage. That night I sat at my piano and wrote a new song. Not for Stephen. For myself. About the boy who had loved in secret and the man who was finally learning to love openly. The notes came slow and honest, each chord carrying the weight of every choice we had made. By morning I knew I couldn't keep waiting for Stephen to figure out his life. I had to figure out mine. I booked a small gig at a local venue for the following weekend. Nothing big. Just me, my guitar, and the truth. When I stepped on stage and sang the new song, the crowd didn't go silent. They listened. They clapped. And for the first time in years, the applause felt like it was for all of me, not just the parts one had hidden. Stephen showed up halfway through the set, standing in the back near the bar. Our eyes met during the final chorus, and I saw the same mix of pride and regret I had seen on the cliff path. After the show, he waited for me outside. You were incredible, he said. You always were. We walked along the river walk, the city lights reflecting on the water like they had back in college. I told Emily I need space, he admitted. Not a breakup. Just time to sort through everything. She's staying with her sister for a while. He stopped under a street lamp. I don't know what the future looks like, Reed. But I know I don't want to keep losing pieces of myself. I studied his face, seeing both the boy I had loved and the man he was becoming. I'm not waiting for you to decide, I told him gently. I've spent too many years doing that already. But I'm here as your friend. The rest we'll see." He nodded, understanding the boundary I had drawn. As we said goodnight, I felt something shift inside me. The song in the ballroom had forced the truth into the light. Now it was up to both of us to decide what we would do with it. Word count: 1005. File 5. The months that followed moved like a slow river, carrying us forward whether we were ready or not. Stephen started therapy in Chicago, driving in twice a week from the suburbs where he and Emily had bought a house before the wedding. He didn't ask me to join the sessions, but he shared pieces afterward over late-night coffee runs that reminded me of our college days. His father called once a month, stiff conversations that ended in awkward silences rather than arguments. Progress, Stephen called it. I called it survival. I threw myself into music. The small gig turned into a monthly residency at the venue. Students at the community center started requesting private lessons, and I found myself teaching not just chords but confidence. One 14-year-old boy came out to me after class one afternoon, voice shaking as he described the fear of telling his parents. I told him my story, the edited version, and watched his shoulders relax. In helping him, I healed something in myself I hadn't realized was still broken. Stephen and Emily decided on a trial separation in November. She moved back to California with her family, taking the dog they had adopted together. Stephen kept the house but spent most weekends in the city, crashing on my couch when the quiet got too loud. We didn't touch. We didn't kiss. We talked about everything: the wedding, the song, the future he was trying to build without the weight of other people's expectations. One cold December evening, we drove to the same Michigan Avenue spot where his father had confronted us. Snow dusted the sidewalks and Christmas lights twinkled in shop windows. Stephen bought 2 hot chocolates and we sat on a bench watching the city breathe around us. "I came out to my sister last week," he said quietly. She wasn't surprised. Said she always knew something was different but didn't want to push. He smiled, small but genuine. It felt freeing. I bumped his shoulder with mine. "Proud of you." He looked at me then, really looked, and the old spark flickered between us. But I held back. The scars were still tender. "I'm dating someone," I told him honestly. "His name is Alex. We met at the venue. It's new, casual, but it's honest." Stephen nodded, swallowing whatever he had been about to say. "I'm glad. You deserve that." The words carried no jealousy, only quiet acceptance. We finished our drinks in comfortable silence, the kind that no longer felt loaded with everything unsaid. By spring, Stephen had started volunteering at an LGBTQ youth center, helping teenagers navigate the same fears he had carried. I watched him grow into the man he had always been meant to be, and the pride I felt surprised me. Our friendship had deepened into something stronger than romance ever could have been in those early years. We had become each other's safe place, the person who understood the journey without needing explanations. One night in May, we stood on the roof of my building watching the city lights. Stephen turned to me. "Thank you for singing that day, for forcing me to see myself." His voice was steady. "I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't." I smiled. "I don't know where I'd be either." The wind carried the scent of blooming lilacs from the park below. For the first time, the past felt like a chapter that had ended rather than a wound still bleeding. Alex and I continued seeing each other, easy and kind. Stephen started seeing a woman from the youth center, someone who understood his complicated history. We double-dated once, laughing over terrible pizza and inside jokes that only the 4 of us understood. Life had moved on, carrying us in directions we never could have planned that day in the Santa Barbara ballroom. Summer brought the kind of warmth that made Chicago feel alive again. I stood on the small stage at the community center graduation recital, guitar in hand, watching a room full of proud parents and beaming students. My 14-year-old student who had come out to me months earlier performed his first original song, voice cracking only once. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. I caught Stephen's eye in the back row. He gave me a thumbs up, the simple gesture carrying years of shared understanding. Afterward, we walked along the lakefront, the skyline glowing gold in the setting sun. Stephen had news. I'm moving to California next month. Closer to my sister. Closer to Emily, too. We're talking about trying again, but slower this time. With everything out in the open. He glanced at me. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I stopped walking, letting the breeze off the lake cool my face. I'm happy for you. Truly. And I was. The old ache had faded into something softer, like an old scar that only itched when it rained. You deserve a life that fits who you are now. He nodded. So do you. Alex seems good for you. We shared a quiet laugh, the kind that comes after surviving the hardest parts together. Thank you for being the person who showed me it was okay to stop hiding. We hugged there on the path, a long, brotherly embrace that carried no expectations, only gratitude. When we pulled apart, Stephen smiled. Keep singing, Reed. The world needs that voice. I watched him walk away toward the parking lot, shoulders straighter than I had ever seen them. The man who had once been terrified of his own heart was now walking into a future he had chosen for himself. And I was doing the same. That night I sat at my piano and played the song I had written the day after the wedding confrontation. The one about learning to love openly. The notes filled my apartment, honest and full. Outside, the city hummed with possibility. I thought about the boy who had loved in secret and the man who had finally found his voice. Both versions of me had led to this moment. True growth, I realized, wasn't about getting the happy ending you imagined at 20. It was about becoming the person who no longer needed to hide to feel whole. True or false? Revealing the truth even when it shatters everything is always the beginning of real freedom.